The name's Mabus. Boss fights are an integral part of many games. A massive challenge every so often to make sure you are ready and worthy enough to progress further in your adventure. And in Banjo Kazooie, it's no different. Sure, you could avoid some and lose out on a jiggy or two, but with some of the epic fights on this list, would you really want to do that? This, however, is one of those boss fights that you simply can't avoid. Appearing 3 times throughout the game, Klunko stands in the way of your progress, and unless you defeat him, your game comes to a screeching halt. In fact, it's pretty much the first thing that happens to you once you start up the game. Hey kids, want to play Banjo Tooie? Well, you have to earn it first. And when you are new to the game, it can be a tough fight. But to veteran players, he's kind of a joke. But since we never got to fight him in Banjo Kazooie, it's kind of nice to finally get this matchup. Each time you bump into Klunko, he has another potion to try out that'll hopefully give him the edge in battle, turning him into either a giant, duplicates, or invisible. And some potions don't work as planned, failing in places to give you a nice little counterattack opportunity. Overall, Klunko is a great reappearing boss that relentlessly tries and fails to keep you from getting to his master. You're nearing the end of Banjo Tooie, and look to polish off the rest of the game way up in the high altitudes of Cloud Cuckoo Land. By this time you are pretty familiar with the game and the routine that each level plays out. Wumbo transforms you into something that you use to your advantage, and Mumbo does some funky shaman magic to set you up for success. Not surprising at this point. Been there, done that. So when you venture into the first Mumbo skull you see, you don't think too much of it. Chances are you've never seen the second one yet, and nothing seems out of the ordinary except for the fact that Mumbo is taking a nap when you get upstairs. But hey, it's the end of the game, and he's tired from all he did to help you along the way. I mean, Banjo and Kazooie didn't get any breaks.
Guess what? I don't get breaks.
But we did ask for his help after all, so let's not question Mumbo.
And nobody questions him.
But to your shock, he stands up and zaps you. Turns out this isn't Mumbo, but his robotic doppelganger Mingy Jongo, sent here to put an end to your adventure. A nice little way to spice things up near the end of the game. Well done, Rare. Well done.
Santa Claus doesn't give any breaks!
Yooka-Laylee had some great boss ideas, but their difficulty curves didn't really match the level that they were in. The Great Rampo had me spitting fire for the introductory world, Breeze Block was an utter joke, and I don't even want to begin to talk about how ridiculously long of a fight Inept was. Which means by process of elimination there isn't really much to choose from. And while Capital B and Trev the Tentacle were pretty decent, there's really only one from this game that was good enough to make this list. And that, my friends, is the Interstellar World Widow, Planet. The backstory of this was epic. You're ultimately the one who causes this clash when you accidentally destroy her moon. To add to the epicness, this battle takes place while you're in the Galleon form. To a tune that vaguely, but surely, sounds reminiscent of the Pirates of the Carribean theme with a space overlay tinge to it. All while you change ammunition types accordingly for whatever hemisphere of planet is visible at the time. Until she eventually goes full supernova and explodes into smithereens. This isn't the first, or even the second space body you've destroyed in this world. But damn! It never gets old. Does it, Michael Bay? You know, it kind of pains me to have this one this low. But that's not necessarily a bad problem to have, is it? When you have the epic aerial battle with Mr. Patch as number 7, that means you have some beastly boss fights in this game. And to be honest, if Mr. Patch wasn't so difficult as a child, I would probably have him higher on this list. Because, let's face it, there's a lot of charm in this fight. I don't know if it's the circus atmosphere, the funny cutscene beforehand where Kazooie big brains him into an easier target, or the fact that he has a wicked smoker's cough every time he launches an explosive beach ball at you. It may have been a difficult fight, especially if you saved the harder to reach Patches for last as he got smaller and faster, but there's no denying that Mr. Patch is an absolute treat. So much so that when I found out I had to fight him in nuts and bolts, I lost my mind in excitement. I just love this guy, man. This boss was also slightly difficult during my first playthrough as a young whippersnapper. I remember raging quite hard at this guy, but once I figured out how to efficiently fight him and got significantly more proficient at the controls, he didn't stand much of a chance, especially once I started to play online scummy Call of Duty players. My first-person shooter skills skyrocketed to such a level that it turned poor Target Zan into a complete joke that was about as threatening as a rainbow. But that didn't hurt his placing on this list, because he has other attributes to bring to the table. He is portrayed as an ancient god of target shooting. He even has his own temple, and not one but 2 sacred chambers that each house a Jiggy. Not to mention the countless mini statues of him scattered around the structure, even a golden relic that the Unga Bunga caveman stole. This guy was important, and that hilarious cutscene with an overconfident Banjo and Kazooie as Target Zan is introduced is a nice little cherry on top of this excellently planned out boss. When the first time I played through Banjo Tooie, I completely forgot about Hagwon. So when I got to the top of Cauldron Keep and turned around to see this monstrosity staring at me in the face with its massive drill pointed in my direction, my confidence and excitement quickly turned into fear and, oh shit! I just thought I'd be taking on Grunty one-on-one. But of course she's going to fight like a cat. And that she does. Hiding out in her drill machine, she uses every weapon it is equipped with in order to try and slow you down. Lasers, mortars, even the drill itself. She even pops out of the lid and asks you a few more quiz questions before chucking spells at you. But by far the most satisfying part, aside from playing hacky sack with her head, was when you send a clockwork Kazooie egg into the exhaust chamber and explode her batteries, causing the vehicle to malfunction, and Grunty to panic. With the drill broke down and nowhere left to hide, Grunty deploys the last of Hagwon's tricks and does an all-out attack on Banjo and Kazooie. Minions, mustard gas, and the devastating purple spells that killed poor Bottles at the beginning. But it ultimately fails when you snipe her as she's holding it above her head and drops it inside Hagwon. There's nothing more satisfying in boss fights than when you use an enemy's own weapons and tactics against them. A fantastic way to end the game. Nuts and Bolts didn't have much for bosses. I mean, sure you could count Mr. Patch and maybe some other select few, but I like to think of the Grunty challenges as the boss fights.
That actually makes sense.
And many of them aren't really worthy of this list. But 9-Ball Nightmare, on the other hand, is quite possibly the most innocently fun version of a boss challenge that you could invent. It may have been the way that I tackled the challenge itself, considering that the many ways to beat it were only limited to the imagination in true Nuts and Bolts fashion. For example, you could ram into Grunty, disrupting her shot, shoot her vehicle yourself with grenade eggs, or even sacrifice yourself in front of the ball. But my personal favorite was to take the sticky ball and attach the billiard ball to my helicopter and tow it around the map, weaving the shit out of poor Grunty and her horrible aim.
Fuck me.
Or take it one step further and attach the sticky ball to Grunty herself and tow her around the map while she helplessly tried to shoot at the ball.
Fuck me. Sideways.
Ultimately, for the Nuts and Bolts challenges, it comes down to how you manage to get it done. And if you haven't tried out my 9-Ball Nightmare tactics, I highly recommend you do. It'll be well worth your time. And then you'll understand why it's so high on my list. This boss fight is done in 2 stages with 2 different dragons that each live at the top of their respective mountain peaks. And as different as their environments and tastes in pizza are, they're very similar in looks, arenas, and combat tactics. You fight the hot and spicy chili Billi with cold ice eggs, and the cold and icy chili Willy with hot fire eggs. And you can fight them in any order you want, with the second one being twice as tough. Pro tip, if you fight chili Billi first, and you have Dragon Kazooie, you'll have unlimited fire eggs for the tougher chili Willy, and won't run out. You shouldn't anyway because it's only like 12 shots, but it's a pro tip nonetheless. Now this may seem tedious or repetitive on paper, but the Dragon Sisters are actually quite entertaining and fun. Each of them thinking that you are a pizza delivery boy that they are expecting, yet shoot at you because you venture into their territory uninvited. But that's okay, because you actually use this ridiculousness to your advantage. In order to reach the Dragon Brothers at the top of their respective mountain peaks, you use their projectiles and accuracy against them to demolish buildings and bunions, allowing you to gain access to either a flying pad or claw climber boots to ascend to the top of their mountains and take them out. The only downside to this boss is that you have to take them out first thing, or they will wreak havoc on you the entire time. But that's a minor detail considering that's the first thing I want to do while entering Hailfire Peace anyway. So much fun. There is one bad thing about the Grunty fight at the end of Banjo Kazooie, and that's the fact that you can't replay it unless you replay the entire game. The boss fight itself is such a storytelling masterpiece. When you start off with an overconfident Grunty diving at you with her broomstick, to then slowly retreat to places where Banjo and Kazooie can't hit her, eventually creating a magic shield around her because she seemingly can't escape the attacks. But even that doesn't work because the main event of this fight is the Jinjos that you work so hard to save throughout the entire game. The process of activating the Jinjo statues and then proceed to watch them fly around Banjo like they did all game and then missile towards Grunty and destroy her broomstick is so damn satisfying. Not to mention cool as fuck! Plus, the Jinjos get their sweet, sweet revenge on Grunty. Once her broomstick is broken, Grunty sits on the ledge of her castle and begins an all-out attack, realizing that she has some competition. But she's still behind that cheap shield, and you still can't attack her. But the Jinjonator can. Now Banjo and Kazooie have super weapons.
Well, well, well. How the turntables...
And the utter fear and panic on Grunty's face when she realizes she's beyond fucked is so hysterical, and a fantastic payoff for all the trouble she has caused throughout the game. Payback has never been sweeter. Okay, let's start off by acknowledging the fact that the level of Grunty Industries plays a big part of why this boss is number 1 on this list. Normally I'd try not to take that into account, but for Weldar, it's different, because he's so incorporated with the world itself it's hard to separate. For example, in order to reach him you have to dig so deep into the factory itself by unlocking and powering up doors to infiltrate inside, and once you are at the deepest, darkest part of the basement you encounter Weldar. Now the introduction scene itself with the chirps back and forth between Banjo, Kazooie, and the boss that these games are just so good at doing is worth its weight in gold. And the fight didn't even start yet. But once it does, you have to deal with projectiles, minions, lasers, and Welder trying to squish you.
Great Scott!
Now these things aren't anything you haven't dealt with before, so it's not much of a challenge. That is until Welder tries to vacuum you up and eat you. Well, this is new, and racks the brain for a few seconds until you realize,
Hold up. Wait a minute.
this guy's filled with highly flammable gases. That's nothing a little fire or grenade eggs won't fix. And once you feed him some flame, he politely asks that you refrain from doing that. As if we're gonna listen to this punk. So you continue to ignite his insides until he detonates into a million pieces of debris. Even after you defeat Weldar, you can walk up to his detached head and listen to his funny comments. And on top of all this, he's the only boss smart enough to stash his Jiggy away in a safe spot so that after you defeat him, you actually have to go out and get it yourself. Too bad for him that his shrapnel from exploding shorted out the power to the giant fan that kept his Jiggy safe. You know, it's just not his day. The name's Mabus, and Welder may have been one of the best bosses that were incorporated into the world that they belong to. But Banjo Kazooie games are really good at doing this in general, like with the dragons in Hailfire Peaks, or Terry from Pterodactyl. And this alone is one of the many reasons why these games are so charming and addictive. There are other reasons too, but those are for another day. So in the meantime and in between time, stay tuned for more.